You think more than you act. And it's ruining your life. Not slowly. Not subtly. Completely. You sit with ideas. You replay decisions. You analyze outcomes that haven't happened. You simulate conversations that will never exist. You prepare for a future that keeps moving every time you get close to it. And in all of that movement inside your mind, nothing in your real life actually moves. You confuse mental activity with progress. You mistake awareness for execution. You believe that because you understand something deeply, you are somehow closer to becoming it. You're not. You're standing still. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. That line is not advice. It is a quiet accusation. Because you already know what to do. You know the habits you've been avoiding. You know the conversations you've been postponing. You know the risks you've been dressing up as timing issues. You know the discipline you keep negotiating with. You know the version of yourself that requires action, not thought. And yet you stay in your head. Because thinking feels safe. Thinking gives you the illusion of control without the cost of exposure. It allows you to explore every path without committing to one. It keeps you protected from failure, from rejection, from judgment. Inside your mind, you can rehearse victory without ever risking defeat. But safety has a cost. And you're paying it with your life. Every day you choose to think instead of act, you reinforce a pattern. Not just behavior, but identity. You are teaching yourself that movement is optional. That intention is enough. That clarity can replace courage. It can't. You don't become someone through thought. You become someone through repeated action under resistance. And right now, you resist action more than you resist stagnation. That is the problem. You tell yourself you're figuring things out. You say you need more clarity, more certainty, more confidence. But what you actually need is friction. You need to move before you feel ready. You need to act while the outcome is still unclear. You need to do something that exposes you to reality instead of protecting you from it. Because reality is the only place where transformation happens. Your mind is not a training ground. It is a simulation. And you've been living inside it for too long. Look at your life honestly. How many plans have you built that never became actions? How many ideas have you refined that never left your head? How many times have you said, "I'll start soon," while doing nothing that moves you closer? You are not lacking intelligence. You are not lacking awareness. You are not lacking potential. You are lacking execution. And the longer you delay action, the more painful it becomes to begin. Because now it's not just about doing the thing. Now it's about confronting the time you wasted. The opportunities you let pass. The version of yourself you avoided becoming. So you think more. You analyze more. You delay more. And the cycle tightens. This is how people stay stuck for years while believing they're close. You are not close. You are inactive. And inactivity does not accumulate into progress. It compounds into regret. There is no breakthrough waiting for you at the end of more thinking. There is only clarity waiting on the other side of action. You don't need a better plan. You need movement. You don't need more understanding. You need exposure. You don't need to feel ready. You need to start while you're not. Because the truth you keep avoiding is simple. Your life is not shaped by what you know. It is shaped by what you do repeatedly. And right now, what you do repeatedly is think. That is why nothing changes. Not because you're incapable, but because you're inactive in the only place that matters. The real world. So here is the shift. You stop asking yourself, what if? You stop rehearsing outcomes. You stop waiting for alignment between your thoughts and your emotions. You act. You move with incomplete information. You accept imperfection. You trade mental control for real-world feedback. Because feedback is what builds certainty, not thought. You learn faster by doing one imperfect action than by thinking about it for weeks. You build confidence by surviving real outcomes, not imagined ones. You gain clarity by engaging with reality, not avoiding it. This is not motivational. This is mechanical. Action creates data. Data creates adjustment. Adjustment creates progress. And progress creates identity. That is the sequence you've been interrupting. By staying in your head, you break the chain before it begins. So nothing compounds. Nothing builds. Nothing changes. And you stay exactly where you are, with more thoughts and less life. Do not indulge in dreams of having what you have not, but reckon the chief of the blessings you do possess. Marcus Aurelius. The discipline here is not to think less randomly. It is to think less uselessly. To recognize when thought becomes avoidance. To catch yourself in the act of replacing movement with mental rehearsal. And to interrupt it immediately. Not tomorrow. Not later. Now. You don't need a full transformation today. You need one action. One uncomfortable move. One step that shifts you out of your head and into reality. Because once you move, something changes. Not everything, but enough. Enough to break the illusion that thinking is progress. Enough to remind you that life responds to action, not intention. Enough to start building momentum. And momentum is what you've been missing. Not ideas. Not intelligence. Momentum. This is where it begins. Not with clarity, but with movement. And once you understand this, the question is no longer what should I do? The question becomes, why are you still not doing it? If this hits something real in you, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to the Unbroken Protocol. And go deeper into the next video. Your thoughts are lying to you. Because if you don't confront your mind, it will keep controlling your life. You don't have a thinking problem. You have an avoidance pattern that hides behind intelligence. And it's subtle enough to feel productive. That's why it's dangerous. You sit there, running scenarios, refining ideas, questioning timing, evaluating risk. From the outside, it looks like discipline. It looks like you're being careful, strategic, even thoughtful. But underneath it, there is something else. You are delaying exposure. Because action forces a confrontation with reality. And reality does not negotiate with your thoughts. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Seneca. You've been preparing without ever meeting opportunity. Not because it isn't there, but because you never step into it. You wait until you feel ready. You wait until the plan feels perfect. You wait until your confidence aligns with your expectations. You wait until your fear disappears. It never does. So you stay where you are. And your mind gives you a justification for it. It tells you that more thinking will reduce risk. That deeper understanding will give you an edge. That clarity must come before movement. But the truth is simpler than that. You are using thought to postpone discomfort. And the longer you postpone it, the more power it gains over you. Because fear that is not faced does not shrink. It grows. It becomes more detailed, more convincing, more logical. It starts to feel like wisdom. But it isn't wisdom. It is resistance, dressed in intelligence. You begin to believe that you are being smart by not acting. That you are avoiding mistakes. that you are protecting yourself from unnecessary pain. But what you are actually doing is choosing a slower, more permanent kind of pain. The pain of stagnation. The pain of watching time move while you stay still. The pain of knowing what you could be doing and not doing it. This is where most people break. Not because they lack ability, but because they become too comfortable in mental preparation and too unfamiliar with real-world friction. They forget what it feels like to act without certainty. They lose their tolerance for imperfection. They start needing clarity before movement, instead of gaining clarity through movement. And that reversal is what traps them. You've felt this. You've had moments where you knew exactly what needed to be done. Not vaguely. Clearly. And still, you didn't move. You delayed it. You told yourself later. You convinced yourself it wasn't the right moment. And in doing that, you trained yourself to hesitate. That hesitation is now your default. Not because you decided it, but because you repeated it. Every time you think instead of act, you reinforce that pattern. Every time you delay, you strengthen it. Every time you choose comfort over exposure, you make the next decision harder. This is not about motivation. It is about conditioning. You have conditioned yourself to stay in your head. And now, your mind feels like the safest place to be. But safety is not neutral. It has a direction. It either protects growth, or it prevents it. And in your case, it is preventing it. Because the version of you that you respect does not live in thought. That version exists in action. In decisions made without certainty. In risks taken without guarantees. In movements made despite resistance. That version of you is built through repetition of action, not repetition of thought. So if you want to become that person, the process is not complicated. It is uncomfortable. You must reverse the pattern. Not all at once, but consistently. Instead of thinking first and acting later, you act first and adjust after. Instead of waiting for confidence, you move with doubt. Instead of avoiding friction, you step into it. Because friction is where growth hides. Not in clarity. Not in comfort. In resistance. You don't need to eliminate overthinking. You need to interrupt it. You need to catch the moment where thought turns into delay. And you need to move immediately. Not when you feel ready. Not when it makes sense. Immediately. Because speed breaks hesitation. And hesitation is your real enemy. Once you hesitate, your mind takes over. It starts generating reasons. Logical reasons. Convincing reasons. Reasons that feel intelligent. But all of them serve the same purpose. To keep you still. So you don't negotiate with that voice. You override it. With action. Small at first. But real. Because real action creates something your mind cannot simulate. Consequences. Feedback. Correction. Growth. This is where your life begins to change. Not when you think better, but when you act sooner. You stop giving your mind time to build resistance. You move before it has the chance to convince you otherwise. And over time, something shifts. You stop seeing action as something that requires motivation. You start seeing it as default. Something you do regardless of how you feel. That is discipline. Not intensity. Consistency under resistance. And once that becomes your baseline, everything changes. Not instantly, but inevitably. Because now you are building something. Not imagining it. You are creating movement. Not rehearsing it. You are engaging with reality. Not hiding from it. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Marcus Aurelius. The obstacle is not your lack of clarity. The obstacle is your avoidance of action. And the solution is not more thinking. It is more doing. You don't need to eliminate fear. You need to move with it. You don't need perfect timing. You need immediate execution. You don't need a better version of yourself to begin. You need to begin to become that version. So here is the standard. When you notice yourself thinking instead of acting, you move. Not later. Now. You send the message. You start the task. You take the step. You break the delay. Because every time you do that, you weaken the pattern that has been holding you back. And every time you don't, you strengthen it. There is no neutral. You are either reinforcing hesitation or building momentum. And momentum is what separates people who stay stuck from those who move forward. Not talent. Not intelligence. Momentum. So the question is not whether you understand this. You do. The question is whether you will act on it. Now. You are not overwhelmed because life is complex. You are overwhelmed because you refuse to decide. And indecision is the quietest form of self-destruction. It doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't feel urgent. It doesn't announce itself as failure. It hides behind phrases like "I'm still thinking," or "I need more time," or "I'm not sure yet." But what you are really saying is this. You are unwilling to commit. And without commitment, nothing in your life can take shape. He who is brave is free. Seneca. Freedom is not found in endless options. It is found in decisive action. You believe that by keeping your options open, you are protecting yourself. That by not choosing, you are avoiding the risk of choosing wrong. But what you are actually doing is trapping yourself in a permanent state of hesitation. Because every unmade decision carries weight. It lingers in your mind. It drains your attention. It creates background noise that never turns off. You wake up with it. You carry it through the day. You return to it at night. And over time, that mental load becomes your normal. You call it overthinking. But it's not overthinking. It's unresolved action. You are holding too many open loops. Too many maybes. Too many delayed decisions. And your mind is not designed to carry that indefinitely. So it compensates. It tries to simulate outcomes. It runs scenarios. It loops through possibilities, trying to find certainty before you act. But certainty is not something you find in thought. It is something you build through action. And until you understand that, you will keep searching for clarity in a place where it does not exist. You don't need more time. You need closure. You need to start making decisions, even when they feel incomplete. Because every decision, even the imperfect ones, clears mental space. It removes weight. It gives direction. And direction is what you've been lacking. Right now, your life is not difficult. It is undefined. And what is undefined becomes overwhelming. Because without direction, everything feels equally important. Every task feels urgent. Every possibility feels necessary. And you end up doing nothing meaningful because you're trying to consider everything at once. This is the trap. Not laziness. Not lack of ability. Lack of decision. You hesitate, and in that hesitation, you lose momentum. You delay, and in that delay, you lose clarity. You think, and in that thinking, you lose time. And time is the one thing you cannot recover. While we are postponing, life speeds by. Seneca. You feel like you are waiting. But life is not waiting with you. It is moving. Every day you spend in indecision is a day that compounds into distance between where you are and where you could be. Not because you chose the wrong path, but because you chose no path at all. And no path leads nowhere. So here is the shift you avoid. You must become decisive before you feel ready. You must choose without full information. You must accept that some of your decisions will be wrong, because wrong decisions can be corrected, but no decision cannot. You don't get feedback from hesitation. You don't grow from delay. You don't build anything from staying in your head. You build by committing, by moving, by adjusting after. This is how clarity is formed. Not before action, after it. You take a step. You observe the result. You adjust your direction. You take another step. And through that process, something begins to happen. Your mind quiets, because it no longer needs to simulate everything. It now has real data to work with, real experience, real outcomes, and that replaces the noise. This is what you've been missing. Not intelligence, execution, not ideas, commitment, not clarity, direction. And direction only comes from decision. So you simplify. You stop trying to solve your entire life at once. You focus on what is directly in front of you. The next move, the next action, the next decision. And you make it. Quickly. Not recklessly, but decisively. Because speed matters. The longer you sit with a decision, the more your mind interferes, the more doubt it creates, the more resistance it builds. So you reduce that window. You train yourself to act within it. You see what needs to be done. You decide. You move. No extended negotiation. No endless internal debate. Because debate leads to delay. And delay leads back to the same place you've been trying to escape. Stagnation. This is not about becoming impulsive. It is about becoming effective. It is about trusting that you can handle the outcome of your actions, instead of trying to control every variable before you begin. Because control is not found in prediction. It is found in response. You cannot control what happens, but you can control how quickly you adapt. And adaptation requires movement, not thought. Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others. Marcus Aurelius. Stop speculating about outcomes, about timing, about whether you're ready. You are not ready, and you will not become ready by thinking. You become ready by acting. By making decisions that force you to grow into the person who can handle them. That is the path. Not comfort. Not certainty. Expansion through pressure. So here is what changes now. You stop leaving decisions open. You close them. You pick a direction. You commit to it. And you move. Even if it's imperfect. Especially if it's imperfect. Because perfection is just another form of delay. And delay is what has been costing you your life. You don't need to solve everything. You need to start something. And then continue. Relentlessly. Until momentum takes over. And once it does, something shifts. You stop feeling stuck. You stop feeling overwhelmed. You stop feeling like you're behind. Because now, you are moving. And movement is the only thing that creates progress. Not thinking. Not planning. Movement. If you feel that shift, don't ignore it. Act on it. And stay with this. You keep waiting for a moment that does not exist. A moment where everything aligns. Where your mind is quiet, your emotions are stable, your confidence is high, your plan is clear, and the risk feels acceptable. That moment is a fantasy. And the longer you wait for it, the more your life begins to decay in place. Do not wait. The time will never be just right. Start where you stand. Napoleon Hill. You've built a condition in your mind. A condition that says action must be justified by feeling. That movement must be supported by confidence. That execution must be backed by certainty. And because those conditions are rarely met, you rarely move. So your life becomes conditional. You act only when it feels right. You move only when it feels safe. You begin only when it feels clear. And because feelings are unstable, your actions become inconsistent. That inconsistency is what's destroying your momentum. Not your ability. Not your intelligence. Your inconsistency. You don't lack discipline because you can't act. You lack discipline because you only act when you feel like it. And that is not discipline. That is dependence. Dependence on mood. Dependence on clarity. Dependence on emotional alignment. But the reality is this. The people who move forward consistently are not the ones who feel ready. They are the ones who act regardless of how they feel. They detach action from emotion. They stop asking themselves, do I feel like it? And start asking, is this necessary? That question changes everything. Because necessity does not care about your mood. It does not wait for your confidence. It does not negotiate with your fear. It demands execution. And once you begin operating from necessity instead of feeling, your life shifts into something far more controlled. Not easier. Controlled. You wake up, and instead of evaluating how you feel, you execute what must be done. You remove the internal debate. You eliminate the emotional filter. You act. And in doing that, something begins to stabilize. Your identity. Because now, your behavior is no longer dictated by temporary states. It is dictated by standards. And standards create consistency. Consistency creates momentum. Momentum creates results. This is the structure you've been missing. You've been trying to build results on unstable foundations. On feelings. On motivation. On fleeting clarity. But none of those hold under pressure. So every time resistance appears, you collapse back into thought. Back into delay. Back into the same pattern. You think about doing it. You imagine yourself doing it. You even convince yourself that you will do it. And then you don't. And that gap between intention and action is where your self-respect begins to erode. Quietly. Slowly. But consistently. Because every time you fail to act on something you know you should do, you send a signal to yourself that your word does not matter, that your intentions are unreliable, that your future actions cannot be trusted. And over time, that becomes your identity. Not someone who can't succeed. Someone who doesn't follow through. That is far more dangerous. Because once you lose trust in yourself, everything becomes harder. Every decision carries more weight. Every action feels more difficult. Every commitment feels uncertain. And you begin to hesitate not because the task is hard, but because you don't trust yourself to complete it. This is what overthinking leads to. Not just inaction. Self-doubt. And that self-doubt feeds the cycle. You hesitate because you doubt yourself. You doubt yourself because you hesitate. And the loop continues. Unless you break it. Not with thought. With action. You rebuild self-trust the same way you lost it. Through repetition. Through doing what you said you would do. Even when it's small. Especially when it's small. Because small actions, repeated consistently, begin to restore something. Credibility with yourself. You say you'll do something. You do it.
No negotiation. No delay. no emotional interference.
And you repeat that again and again and again until something shifts. You start to believe yourself again, not because you feel confident, but because you have evidence. And evidence is stronger than feeling. Evidence cannot be argued with. It is built. And once you start building it, your relationship with action changes. You stop seeing it as something optional. You start seeing it as something inevitable. Something you do because that's who you are, not because you feel like it. This is where discipline becomes identity, not effort. Identity. And identity removes friction, because you no longer debate whether to act. You act because it is aligned with who you are. That is power, not motivation, not intensity. Consistency rooted in identity. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Epictetus. You've already decided who you want to be. You've thought about it enough. You've analyzed it from every angle. You've imagined it in detail. Now comes the part you've been avoiding. Doing what that version of you would do. Without delay. Without hesitation. Without condition. Because that version of you does not wait. That version of you does not overthink. That version of you does not negotiate with discomfort. That version of you acts. So if you want to become that person, you don't need a new plan. You need alignment between your actions and that identity. Immediately. Not gradually. Not eventually. Immediately. You close the gap between who you are and how you act. And you do it through execution. Relentless. Consistent. Unemotional execution. This is where your life begins to shift from potential to reality. Not when you feel ready, but when you stop waiting. If you feel the weight of this, don't let it pass. You already know what to do. That's the part you keep avoiding. Not confusion. Not lack of clarity. Avoidance. Because if you were truly honest with yourself, you would admit something uncomfortable. There are actions in your life right now that require no further thinking, no more planning, no more preparation, just execution. And yet, you keep returning to thought. You keep circling the same ideas, refining the same plans, revisiting the same decisions, as if one more layer of thinking will finally unlock the courage you've been withholding. It won't. How long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself? Epictetus. That question is not philosophical. It is personal. Because the delay is not external. It is you. You are the one extending the timeline. You are the one postponing action. You are the one choosing thought over movement. And every time you do that, you reinforce a reality where nothing changes. Not because it can't, but because you won't move. This is the final confrontation. Not with your circumstances, with your standard. Because your results are not a reflection of what you want. They are a reflection of what you tolerate. And right now, you are tolerating hesitation. You are tolerating delay. You are tolerating inaction. So that is what your life reflects. Not your ambition. Not your potential. Your tolerance. If you tolerated discipline, your life would reflect discipline. If you tolerated discomfort, your life would reflect growth. If you tolerated uncertainty, your life would reflect progress. But you don't. You tolerate comfort. You tolerate delay. You tolerate thinking instead of doing. And that is why nothing shifts. Not permanently. Because temporary bursts of action don't change identity. Standards do. And standards are enforced through repetition. Daily. Consistent. Unavoidable repetition. This is where most people stop. They understand what needs to change. They feel the urgency. They feel the weight of their inaction. And for a moment, they decide to move. But then something happens. Emotion fades. Motivation drops. Resistance returns. And because they never built a system for execution, they fall back into the same pattern. Thinking, delaying, avoiding. That cannot be you. Not if you are serious about changing your life. Because seriousness is not measured by intention. It is measured by what you do when you don't feel like doing it. That is the line. That is where identity is revealed. Not in moments of clarity. In moments of resistance. When everything in you wants to delay, wants to think, wants to escape into your mind. And you act anyway. That is the shift. Not dramatic. Not visible. But absolute. Because in that moment, you break the pattern. You interrupt the cycle that has been running your life. And you replace it with something stronger. Execution. You don't need to overhaul your life overnight. You need to establish one rule.
A non negotiable.
When action is required, you act.
No delay.
No analysis. No internal debate. You see it. You move. That is the protocol. Simple. Unforgiving. Effective. And once you begin to live by that, something starts to compound. Not just results. Identity. You begin to see yourself differently. Not as someone who thinks about doing things, but as someone who does them. And that shift changes everything. Because once you identify as someone who executes, hesitation loses its grip. Overthinking loses its power. Delay loses its comfort. Because it no longer aligns with who you are. And anything that does not align with your identity becomes uncomfortable. That is how you reverse the pattern. You make inaction the discomfort. You make execution the default. And over time, what once felt difficult becomes automatic. Not easy. Automatic. Because you trained it. Through repetition. Through discipline. Through refusal to fall back into thought when action is required. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. You've heard that before. Now you understand it. This is not about becoming someone else. It is about removing the distance between what you know and what you do. That gap is where your life has been slipping. That gap is where your time has been lost. That gap is where your potential has been wasted. Close it. Not gradually. Immediately. Through action. You don't need another video. You don't need another idea. You don't need more inspiration. You need to move. Right now. After this ends. You take one action you've been delaying. Just one. And you complete it. Fully.
No distraction. No hesitation.
Because that one action is not about the task. It is about the pattern. You are breaking it. And once it breaks, everything becomes possible. Not easier. Possible. Because now, you are no longer controlled by thought. You are directed by action. That is the difference. That is what separates people who stay stuck from those who move forward. Not knowledge. Execution. So this is where it ends. Not with motivation. With a decision. You either continue the pattern, or you break it. There is no middle. If you're done thinking and ready to move, then stay in this. Subscribe to the Unbroken Protocol. And continue with the next video. Your thoughts are lying to you. Because until you master your mind, it will keep mastering you.